Record. Okay. Yeah, I guess this is only audio.
No, it says it's recording. So.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now I'll share my screen again. Okay, cool. All right. So the first topic is chapter 2, the absurdity of life without God. And when we talk about the absurdity of life without God, we're not using this as an argument to prove God exists, or just showing someone that it's a relevant question to ask whether God does exist, and showing someone that what's to be gained if God exists, and what they lose if God does not exist. This is called a reductio ad absurdum argument, reduction to absurdity, a form of argument that proves a statement by demonstrating its opposite is absurd. We saw this in the book, page 29, if you'll read it. Dr. Craig asked Andrei Gibb, a Russian cosmologist, why so many people were turning to God after the fall of communism. And Andrei Gibb said, in mathematics, we have something called proof by the opposite. You can prove something to be true by showing its opposite to be false. For 70 years, we have tried Marxist atheism in this country, and it didn't work, so everybody figured the opposite would be true. Now, two definitions you need to know to really understand this is objective and subjective. I'm sure that probably everybody knows those, but just in case. Objective is when something's true independent of whether the person believes it to be true or knows it to be true. So things like 2 + 2 = 4 is true whether or not someone thinks it is, or things like the law of non-contradiction, that something can't be both true and not true at the same time. Those are true whether someone thinks it is or not. And I'll argue that morality is much the same way. Subjective is something that's just relative to the individual. So a preference for a favorite food or sports team, things like that. Now, a note about truth. Truth can't be subjective. It's by definition exclusive, meaning that there are true things and there are not true things. So to say that truth is subjective is to say there is no objective truth. And that's self-defeating, because the statement, there is no objective truth, is an objective truth claim. That's a good way to respond to somebody who's saying, well, truth is just relative to the individual, or this is true for me, but it may not be for you. That's a bogus statement. So now, 3 things you can't have in an atheistic worldview: meaning, which has to do with significance; value, which has to do with good and evil, right and wrong; and purpose, which has to do with a goal or a plan. Here's a quote from Dr. Craig: if God does not exist, our lives are ultimately meaningless, valueless, and purposeless, despite how desperately we cling to the illusion to the contrary. So the first category is meaning. Man cannot have any significance when he's doomed to die. His life is but a tiny speck in an uncaring and endless universe where there will be no light, there will be no heat, there will be no life, only the corpses of dead stars and galaxies, ever expanding into endless darkness and the cold recesses of space, a universe in ruins. So a very happy picture. In order for us to have meaning, we need eternity. The reason why is because something doesn't mean anything unless it has an effect on the whole, or in the end of something. So without infinity, everything will just die out eventually and will just equate to being totally meaningless. And since our life ends the same as other life forms, we have no more meaning or significance than a mosquito or a barnyard of pigs or any other life form or any other object. So that means advances in technology, science, or medicine are actually pointless in the end, because even if they result in living longer or healthier, life will still be meaningless because we've lost eternity. And then there's a quote from Jean-Paul Sartre where he says, several hours or several years makes no difference once you have lost eternity. So here's an atheist philosopher admitting that fact. However, I'm sure that you've heard of some people who are talking about humans possibly living forever. Well, even if we could live forever, that wouldn't result in a meaningful existence because we'd still be without value and purpose if God does not exist. Okay, so value, like we said, has to do with good and evil, right and wrong. If our destiny is death, it makes no difference how we live because the end result is the same. For humans to have value, they need to have something unique or special among other pieces of matter. But since we're made of the same fundamental building blocks of matter, we're the same as everything else. There's nothing to distinguish us as being more valuable. This would mean that morality really doesn't have any meaning objectively, and it's just relative to the individual person. So further explain why objective morality can't work on atheism. So as I just said, because on atheism, everything's reduced to the physical, there's nothing to distinguish between human beings and any other cluster of cells. And given naturalism or atheistic naturalism, meaning just the physical exists, we're just an accident of nature, a byproduct of random chance of evolution, a rearrangement of the same particles like any other material object you can think of. And even Richard Dawkins, though he loves to talk about how immoral the God of the Bible is and all that stuff, admits that on his own worldview, there's no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference. We are machines for propagating DNA. And so the result is total relative morality. We have no way to hold someone responsible for what they do. And so things like war, oppression, or crime, they aren't really evil, but just one clump of cells interacting with another clump of cells. As Dr. Craig says, to kill someone or to love someone is morally equivalent. And I think we all can attest that that feels really wrong inside us to say that. So no ultimate purpose, the last category. In order for there to be purpose in life, there must be some kind of goal or a plan. But if our destiny is a cold grave in the recesses of outer space, there's no goal, life is pointless. And number two, even if our life did not result in death, without God, we still cannot have purpose because there's no plan for our lives. Nature didn't plan for us to exist. We're just a miscarriage of nature. And so oftentimes when I'll talk to people about this, they'll say, well, don't atheists recognize this? And assuming that they must have kind of some response to this or a rebuttal. But atheists do recognize this, especially philosophers. Nietzsche wrote in The Gay Science. This passage is in On Guard, so you can read the whole thing there. But the basic idea of it is that without God, there's no morality. There's no way to determine right and wrong. And there's no really comfort for humanity. We have to live with the cold, brute fact that morality doesn't matter at all. The way we treat people really doesn't matter. Bertrand Russell, he also agrees with this. I'll skip a little bit through this. So he says that humans are an accidental collocation of atoms, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave, that all the labors of the ages, all the devotion, inspiration, noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction and the vast death of the solar system, and that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. And he goes on to say towards the end, only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. So let's think about that for a sec. Unyielding despair, a firm foundation, that's total contradictory, because unyielding despair isn't any kind of foundation at all. That's chaos. And then he says the soul's habitation can be safely built on chaos. We all can see that doesn't make much sense. So here's an example how Bertrand Russell, he realizes that on his own worldview, there's nothing but despair, but he's trying to make some kind of meaning or something out of it, even though he knows there's not. So he's not living consistent within his own atheism. And that kind of leads to the next section. Francis Schaeffer, Christian apologist. I believe he was one of the main influences on Dr. Craig. So he's been around a while. He mentioned these two stories. One is the upper level of God, meaning, value, and purpose. So where morality actually matters, and then the lower, which is just the physical world. And so you'll often find that when atheists don't like meaning, value, and purpose because they want to live how they want, they'll ignore that and they'll say, well, God doesn't exist, and so I can do whatever I want. But then when somebody does something to them, they'll really feel like it actually matters, that morality is objective. And so they jump up to the upper story of God, meaning, value, and purpose. But that's totally inconsistent with atheism. And so the only way to have this group morality on atheism is basically to embrace what Dr. Craig calls the noble lie, meaning that we just decide that morality has meaning, even though we know it doesn't ultimately. And so I don't think any atheist in the world will live consistently on their own worldview. I think they all want morality to be objective to some degree. We could cover that more in detail later on. So why is Christianity different? Why does it give us meaning, value, and purpose? Well, we do have meaning because the creator of the universe has a plan for our lives, and we have eternity. Our existence is truly significant, and what we do really does matter. And we have value because God created us as image bearers. He gave us value, and we're much more than selves. We're wonderfully created and loved by God. And then lastly, Christianity gives us purpose. Our purpose is to glorify and enjoy the Lord forever. And if that's what we were created for, then what could be more fulfilling than that? Now, some objections to this. Can atheists live moral lives? It's a very frequent question that you'll hear, but notice we haven't said anything about whether atheists can live moral lives. We're just pointing out that on atheism, that there can't be objective morality. So if theism's true, then yes, an atheist could live a moral life in the sense that they could do good things just as a Christian could do good things. However, if atheism's true, the question doesn't make any sense because objective morality doesn't exist. Can I create my own meaning? Well, in order for us to have meaning, it would have to exist independently of ourselves. It'd have to be objective meaning, not subjective meaning. So I could feel that maybe if I'm an athlete, a hockey player, let's say, since we're in Finland, that my goal is to hit in more or score more goals than anyone else in history. Well, that matters just for me, but it doesn't matter for the whole, right? So for meaning to actually exist, it needs to exist outside of just you. It has to exist independently of you. So that's what we mean by having meaning. So that's impossible on atheism. And then I'm fine with morality being subjective. Well, nobody's okay with that. And I wrote here, so would you be okay with someone hurting your loved ones? If morality is subjective, you getting angry about someone doing that would be ridiculous, because on atheism, your loved ones don't have any value. So why be more upset about someone killing your family member than stepping on your garden plants? Again, we're just dealing with basic material here. We're nothing more than material on atheism. Does anyone have any questions about this? Maybe, let's see, unmute.
Did you mute everyone?
I don't know.
No.
I don't think so.
No.
Is everyone clear, or?
I was thinking about the last point about the morality being subjective. I think in theory that it makes sense, but I'm just wondering if atheists would actually think that way in their everyday life.
Yeah, well, you could say that it's subjective, but notice that in order for society to function, you would have to build some kind of objective morality for everyone to follow. Otherwise, it would just be complete chaos. And
That's true.
And then again, you're getting into embracing the noble lie that it matters when it really doesn't, right? And you'd also have to say that whatever society determined to be moral would be the most moral thing. So things like racism, for example, or slavery, like a while ago, that was at one time the majority agreed that that was the right thing to do. So that would have been the most moral thing to do if society decides what's moral for everyone, right? The people who actually fought against it would be actually the least moral. So again, you're kind of violating this inner sense you have that something's really wrong about it. Yeah, does that clarify?
Yeah, it makes sense, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions about this? All right, I'll move on because this is probably the more difficult thing to.
Sorry, I had something to say.
Yeah.
Matt, sorry. It's not a question, but it's just a comment that it's worth thinking about. I think, and now here I'm coming a little bit from the worldview that we're maybe raised in the Western culture, and especially here in the education system in Finland, that like what exactly does it mean to do good, and what exactly like morality is about. I think the problem, and I'm just making a distinction here. The problem when we base our code of ethics on Christianity, so we don't call ourselves atheists, perhaps in that way, but the problem of a society that base our sort of ethical, moral foundation on the teachings of Jesus, but then we don't actually have any more connection with him, is something that I think is kind of worth talking about. And I'm just bringing this up because there's a very big difference in my mind between the North American, or especially American, way of looking at atheism and the Finnish way of looking at it. That was more my point. So it's just a distinction I'm kind of bringing to the table.
Interesting.
And something that maybe we don't have to look at it now, but something that could be talked about even more in the future. And actually the example of slavery, that's a really good one. And there are literally hundreds others just like it, but we don't tend to sit here and think about it.
Right.
So just a comment.
Yeah, that's a good point. And often you'll see people, like in the States, for example, abortion is a huge issue, right? And so you'll see people say, well, it's legal, so it's moral, right? As if to say that you can't question their judgment. But again, you go back to things like slavery or segregation between blacks and whites. Well, if it's moral because society decides that, then I'm the least moral person if I object to it or if I fight against it. And that kind of fights your inner intuition. I think that morality actually matters. We all feel that morality really does matter. You could say that it's just a product of evolution that helped you survive, but there's also things about morality that seem to put that into question. Like, why would I feel like it's better for my survival to help a starving person on the street when I could have more for myself, for example? That would be one counter argument, but we'll get into that later on.
Yeah, sorry. What Fiona was saying, I think is also very important, this how atheism is different here than in the United States, because I have not really studied at all atheism, and I just know that they deny the existence of God or something divine, but that's about it. So actually to hear the difference is very interesting.
Yeah, that's
for another time, not today, but generally.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Any other things to add or questions before I move on to the contingency argument? All right, I'll start then. Let's see. So maybe everyone mute your screens so that there's no echo. Okay. So now we're going to get into our first argument for God. If you have any questions and you need like clarification as I go through this, just let me know, because I know that not everybody has any background in philosophy, especially philosophy of religion. So just let me know if you have any questions. So this is the Leibniz contingency argument. Leibniz was a logician, mathematician, philosopher, and a devout Christian. He was probably the most intelligent man, or one of them in his time. And you'll find that earlier on, a lot of the biggest names in philosophy and math were Christians, actually. Anyways, let's get to the argument. So the first three premises of the argument: number one, everything that exists has an explanation for its existence. And number two, if the universe has an explanation of its existence, that explanation is God. Number three, the universe exists. We're not going to cover the third premise, because any seeker of truth to deny that the universe exists would be just silly. So I think we could all agree that the universe exists. And now two more premises will follow from these: that the universe has an explanation of its existence, and number five, therefore, the explanation of the universe existence is God. So for those of you who are not familiar with how philosophical arguments work, these are the premises that you're going to prove with facts. So the premises are not the argument in themselves. You prove each premise, and then it leads to the conclusion. So if you can prove the first three premises, the person listening has to accept that the explanation of the universe existence is God. That's how it functions. So there's two types of explanations that Leibniz was talking or thought about, and that's necessary, which means that something cannot not exist. It's impossible for it not to exist. It's sort of like a foundation for everything else. If it didn't exist, then nothing else could exist. Things like numbers are an example. They have to exist. Or logic. Logic has to exist for us to know anything at all. And then the second one is contingent. This is just basically any object you see around you. It has a cause prior to it. It didn't just exist necessarily. It didn't have to exist. It can fail to exist. It's dependent upon something else. So now we'll revise the first premise to: everything that exists has an explanation of its existence, either in that it's a necessary thing, or its own nature, that it's a contingent thing, that it has a cause. And theists and atheists usually agree that God has to be the first explanation, a necessary thing, not a contingent thing. That would actually not be the definition of what God means to be God. So a lot of times, like for example, I've heard Richard Dawkins say this a lot. I think Stephen Fry, I've heard him say this, who created God? Well, first thing you should know is that no philosopher of religion takes that objection seriously whatsoever. And second, let's look at the logic. Atheists agree that something necessary has to exist. There has to be a foundation for all reality, but they think it's the universe. And then they presuppose that it can't be God. They don't have a reason for that. They just don't think it could be because they're assuming that atheism is true. But since God is eternal, he's the creator of all things, he can't be created because he's the creator of all things. That's what we mean by God. Now, objections to the first premise.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I tried to say something before, but I had muted my microphone. Anyway, this about numbers. Do they really, or are they really necessary?
Well, I guess there's probably some debate on that, but for example, if you didn't have any numbers, you couldn't really make sense of reality.
Because I think I read about a culture and a language where they don't really have numbers. They just have basically maybe one and many. Basically, that is like a number.
Okay.
Numbers existing, but is it really like necessary, or is it just like easier for us to make things understandable in a way? But does it mean they are necessary?
Yeah. So I think what you're saying, yeah, I think you're getting a little mixed up with objective versus subjective. So just because they don't acknowledge the numbers or have a mathematical system doesn't mean it's not a real thing.
Right.
Okay. So it could still exist even if they're not aware of it. But when I say numbers, I'm not meaning that it's like a physical property that we can touch or use. I'm just saying that the universe seems to operate in like a logical fashion that numbers actually work in describing it.
Right. Yeah.
But there's debate on whether numbers are a necessary thing. I would say that they are in the sense that they're grounded in God. But I don't think they're necessary independent of God. But yeah, it's a little complicated, but I understand what you mean. Yeah, go ahead.
I also would add the speed of light is necessary in the physics and for everything to be able to exist. And it's like a määrä, it's like amount and number that is fixed in every circumstance.
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't mean that it has a necessary existence. It would just mean that it's necessary for the universe we have now to be the way it is, right? So to have a necessary existence, it would have to be the foundation of everything else, right? But light doesn't create anything. Light is just a property. It travels in waves and particles. But I see what you're saying. That's actually something we'll get to in a few chapters to kind of show how the universe is finely tuned to allow for life. But I think, having a necessary existence and something needing to be the way it is for our universe to function are two different things, if that makes sense. Does that help, Auntie? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm just thinking like let's say there is a multiverse.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that would the speed of light, it would still be the same in different physical like contexts.
You mean so in different universes it would still be the same speed? Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That again would just be an example of that it would need to be that way for that universe to exist. It wouldn't mean that it has to be that way, because if you accept the multiverse, you're still going to need a beginning of the multiverse.
Exactly.
So the light would have to come into being at some point, right? So if we're looking for something that didn't need to come into being. It just existed. Yeah, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's go to the objections to the first premise. So the first one is called the taxicab fallacy. This is pretty easy to see why it's not logical, but everything in the universe has an explanation, but not the universe itself. So that's called special pleading, when you're just agreeing with the argument as far as it suits your position, right? You're ignoring the fact that the universe would need an explanation. To illustrate that, Dr. Craig has this ball analogy to kind of show how ridiculous it would be to say that something didn't need any explanation at all. So he says, imagine you're hiking through the woods and you come across a translucent ball lying on the forest floor. You'd naturally wonder how it came to be there. If one of your hiking partners said to you, hey, it just exists with no explanation, don't worry about it. You'd either think that he was crazy or figure that he just wanted you to keep moving. And now suppose we increase the size of the ball in the story so that it's the size of a car or even the size of a universe. We'd still have the same issue. We'd still want an explanation for it. And the second objection to the first premise is it's impossible for the universe to have an explanation. And they say this, atheists will say this because if the universe didn't exist, then nothing would exist. And nothingness can't be an explanation of anything. But this is assuming that there's nothing other than the universe that exists. So you're already assuming your conclusion before you've argued the premises of your argument. So, or you've supported the premises of your argument. So that's called question begging in formal debate. That's not a good way of reasoning. And the second premise, that if the universe has an explanation, that explanation is God. Atheists will largely agree with that second premise. At least atheist philosophers will. So this is really important to get, and this will help you a lot in evangelizing. Think about what the universe is: space, time, and matter. So if the universe had a beginning, it means that space, time, and matter all began to exist. So whatever created the universe had to be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. So what things fit those categories? Well, what philosophers call abstract objects like numbers and sets fit those categories, but we all kind of are aware that numbers don't cause anything to exist. They're more of a description of reality. They don't bring something physical into being. And so I'll argue that the best explanation that fits this would be a personal, immaterial mind, one that's not made of physical matter. And Dr. Craig, he gives 3 reasons. I'm only going to give 2. And then I'm going to actually give 2 of my own. I came across one that I thought was easier to understand. But first, we need to go over 2 explanations. Richard Swinburne, Christian philosopher, I think at Oxford or Cambridge, I don't remember. He has 2 explanations, a scientific and a personal. So to illustrate that, a scientific explanation can explain how like a microwave is functioning while it's going. but it couldn't tell me why it began to function or what its purpose was. But my dad, who turned on the microwave to heat his pizza, could tell me why the microwave started running. So that's the difference. And prior to the universe, we don't have anything running for science to observe. Like I said, we have an immaterial, eternal, spaceless cause of some sort. So there's nothing for science to even be able to investigate there. And then the second reason Dr. Craig gives is that the things that do fit the categories I mentioned, like numbers, they don't have causal powers. So we're left with some kind of unembodied mind. And since we have this timeless thing that created the universe, we're going to get into this next week. It's a little bit complicated, but an infinite thing can't be divided into parts, right? It'd be like, to give you an illustration, let's say I have a library of infinite number of books, and half of them are red and half of them are white. And I take out the half of them that are red books. How many books would I have left? I'd have an infinite amount of books, right? So infinity means that it's the absence of parts or time. It's unchanging. So if we have this thing that's unchanging, stuff like matter and energy that's unchanging couldn't just bring something into being. That would mean there was a change involved, right? However, if something existed eternally and could actually make a choice that now they're going to create at this moment, that could be a possible way that that something could bring something into being and be eternal at the same time. The other explanation I was going to give that's probably much easier to grasp is if something can fail to exist, like a person or a thing, I don't know, a lamp, for example, if it could fail to exist, it means it could have been different than it was, right? That would mean that to determine how it was would require some kind of choice to do it. So that would follow that it would have to be some kind of personal thing to make a choice, because objects, matter, can't make a choice. Only a person can make a choice. So that's why we're left with a personal cause. Now, the objection, could the universe be necessary? That's what's going to be important in evangelism, is trying to convince an atheist that the universe can't be a necessary cause. It can't be a foundation for everything else. Because if it is, then it doesn't need a creator. So, reasons why the universe can't be necessary, because it's not eternal, according to modern science. The Big Bang model, which is the most widely accepted model by far, says that the universe came into existence at a finite point out of nothing. So as we said, the first cause seems to need to be eternal. So the universe is already disqualified because it came into existence. And then the next thing is that things that are made of dependent things, like we were talking about the two types of existence, contingent and necessary. A contingent thing, a dependent thing, cannot be grouped together to form an independent, uncaused thing. So to illustrate this, dependent tiles, for example, the tiles needed a cause for them to exist, right? They can't add up to an uncaused independent floor, because the floor is depending on those tiles to create it. Or if a castle is composed of purely dependent created blocks, then the whole castle must be dependent and created by nature. And when we look at the universe, it's made out of dependent things, like planets or galaxies or whatever, the nature itself. It all seems to need a cause. And now one objection you could say is, couldn't the foundation or the fundamental building blocks of matter be the necessary cause? Those would be quarks, matters made out of particles called quarks. And quarks can't be necessary, or at least they seem very unlikely to be necessary, because first of all, they came into existence with the universe. And also, to say that a quark is necessary would mean that every single individual quark would be a necessary thing. It would have to be that way. And it would also have to be arranged in the way that it is for it to be necessary. It couldn't be dependent on anything, which would mean that the universe had to be the way it is, and that you had to exist the way you do, and that everything you do had to be the way that it is. So that would mean you have absolutely no free will at all. You couldn't actually have knowledge about anything. You'd basically just be a machine. Anyways, so now that we've established that the universe can't be necessary, we're left with a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, personal being who created the universe. And that's what we would call God. And so, since we've accounted for the first three premises, the fourth and fifth one follow logically. You can't deny the conclusions that God is the explanation of the universe. All right, so that's a lot of information. So if anyone has questions or comments, please go ahead.
Yes, I have. So I don't understand what is meant with this Occam's razor.
Oh yeah, that's just that the simplest explanation is usually the best. So, but I would say, to clarify, the simplest one that best fits the data that you have is usually the best explanation. So for example, if I could come up with something that created the universe, it wouldn't be necessary for me to say that, well, I think 2 or 3 personal beings created the universe. I'm actually adding more things than I need to fit the data I have. Does that make sense?
Maybe. This is a very, very deep stuff altogether.
Yeah.
I think it might become a little bit clearer. I mean, the whole thing when I read the chapters.
Yeah.
But basically, you know, the simplest answer would be the answer of what you said about Occam's razor, what it means. But I think that's something that people tend to use, you know, the simplest answer should be the answer, or then they cannot accept it because it's too simple or so.
That's true. It's not a, you know, a principle that will always apply, or it's just like, if it's not a simple explanation, then it can't be the actual one, you know, or like you said, the simple explanation isn't always the best, but it's just kind of a general thing to follow. Like some people will say, well, God is seems like a really complex explanation of things, so that couldn't be simple, but it's the simplest explanation that fits the data we have. So, yeah.
That brings to my mind the idea that, or the thought that many Muslims are saying that, you know, so Jesus died for our sins. So is it that easy? Is it like that simple? And basically, yes, it is that simple, but of course you have to understand the background.
Yeah.
But for them, you know, the idea is too simple because, you know, then again, they think that you can do whatever you want after that. And, you know, Jesus died for your sins, so, I'm free. But yeah, I mean, yes, it's simple, but, you know, don't take it so black and white then, like,
right.
that you can continue doing whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah. In general, these arguments are going to be kind of confusing at first. But once you understand it, it's really helpful in evangelism. And you're not going to have to lay out this whole argument or anything, but you can at least say, if someone says, well, I think that the universe is all that exists, you can explain to them why that's not a good, that's probably not true. So that's kind of why it's good to know these things. This is probably more information than you're going to need in most cases.
I'm also thinking like really, really great points that you mentioned, and about the contingency argument. I'm also like intrigued about today's scientists, for example. Like, I'm sure there are many Christian scientists, but there are also a lot of atheist scientists. And I'm just wondering, like, based on this argument, it's like it's very simple, but still it makes lots of sense. So I'm just wondering, like, how come many scientists don't agree with this, and they insist that they hope and they want to be able to make equations that make God unnecessary. And they, for example, sometimes they speak, for example, string theory, that there are these subatomic particles and quarks that were somehow like floating in the fabric, and then they became just so dense and it caused a big bang. But how can there be these subatomic energies or vibrations before there was anything? And also during the different times, like Leibniz, like you mentioned, he was also Christian, and he was one of the leading minds of his time. And earlier in the times, there were a lot of scientists that were mainly Christian, I believe.
Right.
I'm just thinking, like, is it also part of the time we are living in, the rise of the atheism, or what can explain this? I'm just a little bit, my mind is like boggled a little bit about the thoughts.
I think the first thing we have to remember is that we live in a culture that worships science. And so whatever a scientist says is automatically true because they're a scientist. But we have to remember that science doesn't say anything. Science is just the data, and the people determine what it says. So as any scientist, no matter how knowledgeable they are, is perfectly likely to be wrong about something or right. But I would say that there are Christians or people who have come to faith through science. For example, Hugh Ross, I think he was professor of astrophysics at Toronto, University of Toronto, or something like that, where you were in school. And he was really into cosmology, and he studied the Big Bang, and he came to the same conclusion that we've kind of outlined here. There's also a guy, Luke Barnes. He's a cosmologist in Australia. I was thinking maybe we could have him on here at some point to just talk about these things. Really, really smart guy.
Fascinating.
Yeah, but that's a hard one, Auntie. I don't know why scientists, well, I don't think it's for scientific reasons that scientists reject it or always say that there has to be a scientific explanation. I think it's probably for a personal reason that maybe they just don't want God to exist, or
I would say the same.
yeah, or maybe they just conclude that science can't have anything to do with God.
Yeah, like they could exclude one another.
Yeah. By the way, hello, Jackie here. Hi.
Hello.
It's Auntie's wife. She's a conductor.
Cat lover. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, if I may say one word, it's interesting to hear what you guys how you guys talk about God and or other things sometimes, talking about something that's not really about religion, but still, in a way, they are like has point because it's after all it's all related. But anyway, well, I think scientists, they are in denial, or they have to, because you prove your existence, you prove your theory with the evidence. And about God, yes, if you believe in God, I mean, can you cannot prove it. That's the thing. I mean, so like I know actually the scientists who believe in God, but then also scientists, renowned scientists, and it's in a way that there's no kind of bridge you can build or even prove it between.
Well, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's in a way that either they are in a search for, I don't want to sound so sarcastic, but they are in search for kind of finding the bridge between the religion or the God that they believe in, and the other one is just as a like study, the science as a science.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody says, okay, like how can you prove that there is God? Can you describe it? Can you show it? Where is he? The fact is that we can't. And in a way, that is what the belief is. Believing something that you don't see with your eyes. But in a way, you feel it in your heart. And I mean, it's...
Yeah. I'm curious, what do you mean by like prove? What do you think prove would mean?
Well, that's what people who doesn't believe in God or Christianity, they go, where is Jesus?
Yeah, okay. So
Where
you're
is God?
saying like you would see it like physically, like
Yeah. That's what they go after often. I mean,
yeah,
no way that they can shut us up often, because
right.
we can say, hey, God is this. We cannot put it into one word.
Yeah.
In a way, we believe in God and we feel his presence. I do, but sometimes it's not like always feeling connected with God. It's like human relationship. I mean, you are in love with God, and in a way that I like, for me, I love, I mean, Jesus, but also I have this fear, and sometimes, like, am I doing it right, or am I being a good child, and am I like serving the purpose of life? And that kind of question. I mean, so when you are being questioned, what is God? Where is Jesus? Is it really? I mean, is it really real? And you cannot explain it in one word. So
yeah, I know that's a hard one. But yeah, that's a good point. I think also you have to remember too that scientists postulate many things that they can't see. So demanding that is unrealistic because, first of all, we don't even know what gravity is exactly. We know it's a force that exists. We see the effects. We don't know what it is. We can't see it. We can't touch it. And also when I mentioned quarks, that was the fundamental building blocks of matter. We don't observe quarks. They're impossible to observe. We don't see them at all. We just say that makes sense of the data. So that's what we think exists. It's the same thing with God. It makes sense of the data from what we've said now. So if someone says that, they actually don't hold to that themselves about everything. So.
True. There is a gap. Yes. Yeah, there is a gap.
And I think the scientists,
No.
I think the scientists, they say that they can only see or observe 4% of the universe, and the rest of the like dark matter and dark energy, they don't really know what it is or where it is, but it is. They say that they guess it is somewhere.
It's a trick question. I believe in also data. I believe in God, but I also believe in data and the proof. But I'm also a mathematician. That's what my major is.
Well, and see, a mathematical proof, that's that's actually a stronger proof than science, because
Yes,
medical
absolutely.
proof is actually like 100% that way, right? But science, I can't really prove it to that level of certainty either. So yeah, I see what you're saying. If you think that like we're proving God exists in the mathematical sense of a proof, then no, we can't do that. But
Yeah.
but I mean,
Yeah, and yeah. But Matt, I meant, you know, right in the beginning of the conversation today, that what you mentioned, it actually had a direct connection with what I just said also, and you know, like often there is a question and is it really a question? Already a conclusion, but more like, hey, I am right, you're wrong kind of statement already, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, you had a very good, cool point, and that was the main thing also I wanted to say, you know. But yeah. These are very common question and also the trouble. And yeah, in a way, I feel like I have an answer, but do I really have an answer? Or am I ever going to have a concrete answer? Is it going to be continuous exploration? And yeah, probably, at least at the moment. Yeah.
The way I see it is that I believe many things that I haven't proven scientifically or mathematically. Like I know what I ate for breakfast, and I didn't have to test that. I know that I met my friend.
Very good point.
You know, or
yeah.
I mean, these are things that you can say you have knowledge of, but you didn't have to do any scientific or mathematical work to determine that.
No. Yeah.
You know? And
that's not the place here. yeah.
But I see what you're saying. That's a really important point. Yeah. Anyone else have questions or comments? Let's see. Well, maybe I have two questions. I'm just curious, how do you think we could use this argument when like talking to a non-Christian? Like how do you think it could be useful? And it's kind of, oh, sorry, Antti, go ahead.
One point is like how the argument is also made, composed. It's like the way of logic, like logical thinking. I guess that could be like a starting point when describing the argument.
Yeah. So just trying to, I guess, like when you're talking to someone else, showing them that you've arrived at it through a logical process. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it is. Like going to I guess, through these steps, going to the beginning moment of who or what started the universe.
Yeah. I was curious, Ville, have you ever used like this argument or the Kalam in evangelism or?
I haven't used this one. I've tried Kalam, but it was one time. Well, the discussion went that well, there was like really important to use define your words, because I said everything must have a cause. I said I spoke in Finnish. It's syy. So the person took it as like a meaning that she started talking. Well, there are random events or just happened to happen this way. So, and it was tough to explain that point. So it was like I realized it a bit later.
Yeah. That's important to get that first premise right. Otherwise, you leave yourself open to a lot of easy comebacks, I guess. Yeah, I was kind of thinking with this argument that maybe the best thing to take from it is why the universe needs some kind of explanation, or why the universe couldn't be a necessary cause. Because if nature came to exist, then I've already proven that the supernatural exists. Because I can't have nature create nature, right? Nature began, supernatural had to exist before it. That logically follows. That's the only option available. So I was kind of thinking it would be at least a good doorway to show that supernatural is actually something that could very likely exist. I don't know.
Do you mean, Matt, that you're trying to, like, your take is using these premises to prove that there's something supernatural that created the universe, and therefore that supernatural being or whatever could possibly be God? Is that where you're coming from?
Yes, but more so like just how we defended each premise, just learning that stuff.
Okay.
You wouldn't necessarily have to give someone each premise of this when you're
No,
each person.
I wasn't thinking that. No, exactly.
Yeah.
It could be good to think of hypothetical more hypothetical situations that where one could use these, like, yeah, these kinds of arguments. I mean, one of them you already mentioned, the fact that the supernatural, that we could, yeah, bring this aspect into it.
Right. One thing, one important thing to keep in mind too is that this is a logic. It's a logical argument, and to do science, I actually need logic. So to say that, well, science doesn't show this wouldn't matter, because if I can determine that reason dictates that it has to be that way, I could say that the science is probably wrong. Because to do the science, I would have to have the logic already to determine what the science says, if that makes sense. So if you're encountering someone who's telling you, well, the scientific data doesn't support this, well, that may be true, but it doesn't mean that your argument's invalid if the logic follows well.
Is this a little bit like the evolution theory about us becoming or deriving from apes? Like what they say, they have found these bones and skeletons, and they have found this and this kind of, how do you call them, not species, but how the development from ape to human being is basically scientifically proved. But then as I've not really studied, but I heard that some people say that there is actually the key link or the key skeleton missing to really connect this theory. But basically people jump over it and say, you know, well, we come from the apes. I mean, it's kind of clear, even though scientifically they're still missing something very important.
Yeah. Has anyone studied evolution at all? Yeah.
Quite little, but
Okay. I don't think it poses a threat to theism or the belief in God at all to begin with. So if somebody said that it did, then you had just asked them, well, how? And also
You don't?
Huh?
I'd like to hear your take on that evolution doesn't pose as a threat to theism.
Okay, yeah. So what I mean is that the idea that we all came from a common source wouldn't pose as a threat to theism, because you still need a creation of that, whatever that initial life form was, right?
I'm thinking.
Sorry, go ahead, Antti.
Oh yeah, that was. I had few points, and one relating to the evolution is that one is a little bit like tricky for me, because in the Bible it says that God created human as His own image, and I do believe in evolution very much. So that one is a little bit question mark. How does one explain that God created human in the image of God if we all came from the ocean like hundreds of maybe billion years ago to when the life came on land? Is it thought that we already how would you explain that, like from the theistic point of view?
Oh, well, okay. Well, this isn't my view, but some people hold to the idea that when Adam was made, that God put his image, or when Adam came into existence, if that was by evolution, he put his image on people, or at some point in the process, which is a possible rendering of that. However, I don't hold to that. I think, yeah, I don't think that Adam evolved from life forms in the ocean. I mean, that's kind of speculative. It's not really something you can actually observe. And also what Mario was saying, there's no transitionary fossils showing like this, kind of gradual life form coming to another life form. It always stays in the general sphere. But yeah, if like the if common descent is true, it's still like that the Bible could be reconciled. So
if I may add something there, I would say that there's well, the Bible says that God created us, but it doesn't describe the mechanism of our creation in detail. So it's like, yeah, well, who knows how he created us? Maybe he evolved us from monkeys, who knows? And when it comes to the image of God, then it's the same thing. Like, what is exactly the image of God? I don't think it's a physical image. God isn't some human-looking dude just hanging around and he decided, oh, I'm gonna make someone who looks like me. I think that the image of God here is a more spiritual thing.
Yeah, that's.
I agree with that.
Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe God is energy, for example. Like like that one, I definitely believe that we were created, like somebody started the Big Bang, and like who knows what the image of God is. What do you think about that?
Sorry, say the last part again, Auntie.
Yeah, like if one believes in evolution, then who knows exactly what is the image of God? How does God look like? That was an interesting point that William made.
I think William's right, though, that the image of God isn't meaning in any physical sense. What I think it means is simply that we were made to be kind of caretakers of creation, like he's the caretaker of the universe. So, yeah, we could have just, it says that God breathed life into us. I mean, who knows how that even happened or what happened before it, Yeah. Does anyone else, Willem, do you have any more like takes on that, or?
No, not really. I mean, well, just that, the image of God is probably something that we have similar attributes, as you said. We are the caretakers of the earth, and then we have, say, we kind of reflect his qualities through Jesus when through goodness and we also create things on earth as well. So in a way, that's kind of my interpretation more of the image of God, but I don't know that much about it either.
Yeah, but back to your point, Mariut, about it, like them asserting that this is a fact. I mean, that's just not the case. I mean, to say that common descent is a fact is just not true. Because if it were a fact, they would have to like fully prove, at least in terms of science, that it was, and they haven't. They haven't shown any like chemical way that species can transition or things like that. They don't. They're missing quite a bit of data on that. So it's just a silly assertion. You could say that it's possible, but not a fact. I would. That's what I would say.
If anything, there's even a positive thing for us to take from here is that if even the scientists claim that we came from the same point, and I read as well that they say all of humanity came from two individuals at some point, and they really trace this, that we came from two individuals, so we know that it's either it's probably Adam and Eve, or maybe Noah and his children.
Yeah.
I was thinking about what you said about there's no proof about the development. I've heard some lectures where Richard Dawkins says that about the evolution, like sometimes people say, where is the evolution? How come we don't see it happening? He just mentions that there are like evolution is going on as we speak, but it just takes hundreds of millions of years for beings to evolve. And for example, chimpanzee is like 98% same DNA as the human DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like, well, first of all, I should say that there's different definitions of evolution. I mean, like natural selection, meaning that the best like species outlives one that doesn't fit the environment. That's a form of evolution that's not disputed. So yes, there's very good evidence for that. But in terms of what Richard Dawkins said, I wouldn't really say that that's evidence. He's just saying that within the amount of time it's possible. But yeah, with the part about the chimpanzees have like 99% of the same DNA. I'm not sure about this because I haven't done a ton of research on this specifically, but I think that's not including the junk DNA. So we have junk DNA that they're finding that actually does serve a function. It's called junk DNA because they just thought it had no function at all. But they keep finding that it does actually have some kind of function. And even if we did share 99% of all DNA, that wouldn't necessarily mean that we would have had to come from a common source. It just means we share the same DNA. I mean, you still can't explain how that transition happened. They don't have any, like I said, chemical mechanism to explain how it happened.
Yeah, and even when it comes to the 99% DNA argument, it's kind of a worthless argument because we also have 99% DNA in common with many other animals. So it's like, yeah, we could be descending from dolphins or whatever.
I think we have like 60, 70% same DNA as a banana.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's I don't know. I don't know if that's completely true, but I read it somewhere.
Yeah. But Auntie, there's a book that you could get if you want to read more on that. It's what is his name again? Ville, do you know who I'm thinking of? It's Josh Swamidass. Do you know Josh Swamidass?
I don't know. Yeah, yeah, I know him, Joshua Svadimas.
Okay.
Yeah, he had some new book about.
I can't remember what it's called. Do you?
Yeah, I don't remember what's his name.
Yeah, Josh Swamidas. He did like he's a geneticist at Washington University, and he did this tracing back to Adam and Eve. And he had a bunch of scientists test his theory and theologians test his theory against the Bible. And they all thought that it worked. That's one place you could go. And he actually does think that common descent happened. So you could look at that if you're interested in researching it more. Yeah.
Sure, sounds good. I'll check that out, the book.
Yeah.
Talking also about this, did you want to add something to this, Matt? Now this, what is really talked about in Finland is transgender law, and how this idea that when you are born, then necessarily you're not a boy or a girl, or you can't, I mean, if you are born as a girl, then at some point you might actually see that you are a boy. Like how this whole thing has become so, I don't know if I can call it scientific, but now as they are in the books, and these things are read in the schools as a fact. Like, and I don't think they have done any like so deep scientific proof for this. It's more like this ideology, or this, I think ideology more than, I don't know what else. But like how today people just take things, I guess, how they feel best, and now it's kind of scientific, and now it can be taught at schools as completely normal thing.
So you're asking how can that be scientific? Is that, or how can it be?
Maybe, I don't know if I have a question. It's well, it's, or maybe it's a rhetorical question. It's like, I thought that when things are taught at school, they have some scientific background, or based on something bigger than just ideology. And I feel, at least now, it's more like this ideology that they should be taught as a fact.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And not like a studied, really scientifically studied thing, even though evolution, everything, even though there is some proof for it, but still they really teach it as a complete fact.
Yeah. So what does other people think about that?
Marjut, I have understood that it is based on fact. I mean, I'm not saying that I think it is, but I have understood that because actually we've been struggling with the same thing in Canada for like 10 years back, like years back already. And of course, I'm not absolutely saying I agree with it, and I'm not undermining the political agenda and the agenda of other minority groups in the whole, but according to them, there has been enough science that shows that people's genders are not just decided by a physical factor when they're born, because that's obviously how we normally have determined all these years gender. We take a look at the baby when it's born and we determine their gender, but there's actually other factors that, so basically I think the premise is that there's other factors besides the physical, and they include the psychological, or the, what your body tells you are, or how you, I mean, what your feelings tell you that you might be, rather than just the physical gender. That's my understanding. I'm not an expert in it, but that's what some some of the school teachers like have been telling me that their textbook sources are based on. So
from what I've heard, and well, I haven't looked personally at the science either, but actual scientists are pretty much deny all of this. That this whole gender theory is pretty much based on a pile of lies and political bullshit that come from the social sciences in the universities, where people with no actual scientific training just decide to vet each other's theories based on sketchy evidence at best. And the problem is that, well, the reason it's become kind of accepted scientifically is that as soon as you try to criticize their science, you are immediately called a bigot and expulsed from your university. And so the scientists and the people who could easily disprove it are to either shut down immediately and censored, or they are just too scared to talk about it.
I think there was an Israeli study, like, of course, you can only talk about the physical things, but a study that said that, you know, if you are born a girl, then you actually have those all girly stuff in you, and if you're a boy, then you have all that boy stuff in you, then that's it. You know, you can't say, well, I don't, yeah, basically this was the idea that I read from the article a while ago. And of course, like Fiona, you said, what they say, that it's not only the physical things that determine your gender, but still, like, this Israeli study tried to make a point that what is shown between your legs, you know, that's what you are. Plus, then the social parts, your upbringing and so on, can, of course, twist what you naturally are, or something like this.
Yeah, the thing is that the neurological and biological basis of gender is indisputable. It's been, you know, accepted for decades already, and there's no question about that. I would say the only ground they can stand on really is the fact that not everything is biological or innate, and some of it comes from our upbringing. But the thing is, we just don't know what is societal, cultural, or biological. And there's no real easy way to prove any of that. So the thing is, the line is blurry, but there is definitely a very clear biological basis for gender.
Yeah.
Well, notice how that's all based on a philosophy that your mind is physical, that you are your brain, which is not a fact. Actually, I watched a video yesterday on near-death experiences from this Christian apologist. His channel's Inspiring Philosophy. And the evidence he showed was really clear that near-death experiences seem to indicate that our mind is not physical, that the brain shows certain traits of like emotion and things like that. But there was, for example, one child born without a brain that showed signs of like laughter and happiness, and like could react to certain things. And
Really?
yeah, so I can probably send people that link, but yeah, notice how this whole philosophy of mind thing, though, it's all about they just assume it's our brain without actually thinking that it could be something more than that, you know.
So this child was completely without brain?
Yes.
Is it possible to live?
Usually they, like, babies born with that die very soon, but this child lived for like 2 years, which was like unheard of, I guess. But yeah.
Well, sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah. But part of the good thing about this group is we need to sort of undo the kind of thinking that society like has put on us, that the physical world is all that there is. And that's hard to do because we've grown up in that world.
Mm.
Oh, either. So when would we like to meet next? I guess 2 weeks from now, or
Yeah, I'm fine with Wednesday or Thursday
okay.
so far.
Okay. Seems like Wednesday is not good for Fiona, but I'll do it later. We could figure something out. Is this philosophy a little too heavy, or is it interesting?
I would put it this way. It is heavy, but it's interesting.
Okay.
It is fascinating philosophy, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I was worried that this will be kind of overwhelming, and then people will feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to do apologetics after all. But I think it will get easier, and next week we'll just do one chapter and one argument for God, so it'll be easier to manage.
Mm.
And then once we've gone through that, you will get into things for like the reliability of the Gospels and Jesus' resurrection and things like that. And I think you may be surprised how incredible the evidence is. Basically, what we're doing is that we're building kind of this way of taking someone through the evidence. You show why God must exist. And once you know God exists, then you have, and not only God, but one God exists, bless you. And so once I'm there, I can determine, well, which religions have one God? Islam, Christianity, Judaism. So I know from these three, if I can just test their, how they measure up with evidence, figure out which God is true. So that's how this works. Once you learn the arguments for God, then you can take someone to arguments for the resurrection, and then you've basically given a very solid foundation for Christianity. So hopefully that helps you feel a little bit more motivated to do some of this work now. But yeah. All right. Well, I'll maybe send people a couple dates. They can decide which one works for them.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah.
It was interesting to hear what others had to say, and then so excellent job, Matt.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining, Jackie. It's good to have you here. So
Thanks.
Yeah, you did really it was so clear, your presentation. Thanks.
Oh, thanks. And I was going to say two things. If someone else would like to give a presentation on some research they'd like to do, like Martiud, if you want to do something on Islam, or feel free. Or and then the other thing was, I got apologist who agreed to be interviewed for our group, and I was going to do that maybe in December. He wrote a book called Too Good to Be False. It's a new book on Jesus, and he defends the reliability of the Gospels. And oddly enough, he was a trombonist just like me, so that's how I kind of found out about him, but he agreed to be
Great.
interviewed. So I think that should be fun. So we'll do a Zoom chat with him, and then you can ask your questions to him afterwards. Yeah, all right. Well, would someone like to close in prayer, and then we'll kind of stop?
Do we want to keep meeting on Zoom, or do we prefer to have live meetings?
I prefer meeting somewhere if possible.
Yeah, me too. I hate Zoom, but that's because I have to teach on Zoom like many hours a week, and it's getting worse and worse. So I'm just like totally zoomed out. Sorry. Although it's better when Matt's doing the teaching. That part's good.
Yeah.
But
well,
I would
can use IAC. I mean, I'm just worried if the group does get larger, then we're probably going to run the risk of, with COVID.
I think we can take a look at that like weekly or like every time we are about to meet, what is the best option? Because it is true the corona situation is getting stronger, worse or whatever. So it is good to be cautious, but on the other hand, if we have a space that is big enough, we can all wear masks if so preferred. But yeah,
IEC is really big. I mean, if we're downstairs, it's really big.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I would really prefer meeting face to face. It's better, and because we spend so much time on working on laptops and phones and Zooms and whatever. So in that sense, it would be nicer to have a real meeting.
Yeah.
So did we set a date already?
Well, I was thinking, I mean, we could keep it Wednesdays, but is that bad for you, Fiona?
Yeah, it's not so nice, but I mean, I can see. I normally, well, tonight I went for a concert, but normally I have something else on Wednesdays that I'd rather be doing. Yeah.
Was Thursday bad?
No, I like Thursday.
Jackie, it's bad. She has a rehearsal on Thursday nights. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, if the Thursday is good for everyone, then it's okay.
Well, yeah, no other days seem to really work for people, right? I mean,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, if the Thursday is good for everyone, then then go ahead. I mean, yeah.
Well, weren't we gonna originally alternate? Like this week we're doing Wednesday, so next time we do Thursday, and then we go back to Wednesday. Wasn't that the original plan?
I guess we could do that since some people can't make it on, people on Thursday. So maybe next time we'll meet on Thursday, and then the following we'll meet on Wednesday. And then Jackie, I'll record each meeting if you'd like to watch it. Or,
Oh, sure. Okay.
if you can't make it on a Wednesday.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Yeah, we can use the downstairs at IEC, which is plenty of space. So.
Sounds good.
Okay, so that's the 29th. Sorry, because if I don't write it in my calendar, something else is gonna happen.
Check.
That's how it works.
Okay. Yeah, 29th.
It's not gonna nothing. Yeah, then things just happen. But let's aim for the 29th.
Yeah,
and then
today.
Okay.
And was it not good for somebody at 6 o'clock or 6:30?
I think Sharon had her Finnish class.
Oh, okay.
I think Sharon had something.
Yeah, she was gonna be here today, but I think she got held up at work. So.
Isn't she in quarantine?
Yeah, but she told me that she had work or something that she needed to do. I don't know.
Okay. Well, she might be working from home. I mean, but anyway.
The quarantine is actually now only 10 days.
Oh.
Oh.
So I just came out of I was on quarantine as well, and today, well, it was the last day. So
Yay!
yesterday, yeah.
Congratulations. Okay, excellent. Very nice.
Okay, so I guess next on Thursday in 2 weeks. Was 6:35 for Sharon?
I think her class ended at 6:30, so she needed half an hour to get to.
Yeah, Thursday 7 o'clock works for me.
Okay, and then Wednesdays we could do a little bit earlier, I guess, depending on what Fiona's doing. But yeah, sorry, it has to be late.
I survive.
Okay.
That's fine. Not that late.
Yeah. Where do you live, Marty? Are you far outside of Helsinki?
No, East Helsinki.
Oh, okay. All right. So does someone want to close in prayer and then we'll call it a night?
I can do that.
All right.
Heavenly Father, we thank you that you have given us ways to glorify you, and this, what we're doing in this apologetics group, is one way. I thank you also that you have given us reason and logic and ways to express our thoughts and feelings, and also talk about you and point people to you. And Lord, we ask you that you give us wisdom and understanding in what we're doing here to be able to glorify you with this whole thing. And we pray that this would really yield fruit in its time, that people feel more comfortable to come to you or find you or find reasons to believe in you, and so increase the people coming into your kingdom and people being saved. We thank you that you have put us together, and we thank you for Matt, who has started this whole thing. And we just pray that you will be guiding all of us on this journey, and you will bless us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right.
Thanks for wonderful prayer, Mario.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And thanks again, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
2 weeks.
All right. See you all in a couple weeks then.
In 1 month.
Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.